Good morning. This is PW, and I'm here with another episode of our lead editor training. This is episode number 3. In video number 2, we learned how to adjust the exposure and color of our image using the color board. We also learned how to copy the attributes of one clip and paste those attributes to other clips. We learned how to drop segments into placeholders in the timeline and replace those placeholders with our segments. And most importantly, we learned some of the basics of keying. In this lesson, we will do some touch-up on our keying, choose a background style to place behind our anchors, and learn to scale and reposition those backgrounds so that they have 3 unique backgrounds, one for each camera's perspective. When you're all done today, you will export out your timeline and copy it to the server for grading. After keying, and especially after applying the keyer to the other clips, I'm noticing a bit of haze in the upper corner right here. I'm going to choose to sample a color and then select a small amount of the color in that area, just enough to add to that sample color. Then I'll scrub through the whole clip to make sure that someone's arm doesn't move through that selected area and become keyed itself. Now, instead of copying and pasting the attributes on this one, I'm going to have you just add that sample color to all of the clips. This will give you a little more practice with it. So pause the video right here, go through, adjust the sample color on all of those clips, and then when you're finished, now I'll hide my effects and we're ready to place in the backgrounds. If I select the event called backgrounds, I can see that we have golden glowing particles. If I turn skimming back on, you can see that they just kind of bubble up. We have golden orbs where the focus sort of shifts back and forth. We have fairy dust. This is the one that I chose to use, but you can use any of them. We also have the yellow lines and particles. I think I used this as the credits because it would be difficult to use for the anchors. I'll choose fairy dust again, but you can really choose any that you'd like. When I drag the clip down, I'll have to copy and paste it. I'll copy it, move my playhead to the end, and paste. We need to see if it loops, meaning that the last frame of the video matches the first frame of the video, so that when it is pasted, it loops and it continues without a jump cut. As a contrast, here's a video that doesn't loop well. If I copy and paste, here's the first frame of the second paste and the last frame of the first clip. See if you notice a jump cut. See how the bubbles go, then disappear, and then we're back to having bubbles and the light shifts as well? This isn't a good one for looping. When we re-enable this and go from an Aaron story to a Janine story, the background stays the same. It actually looks like the news desk just slid over. What we need to figure out is what would this background look like from the perspective of camera 1, camera 2, and camera 3. With camera 2, you should notice that there is some dark black in the upper left corner of anchor 1. Anchor 2 also has some dark black in their upper right corner. When we're looking at anchor 2, you can see that we would have a lot of black curling down this way. I'm going to cheat a little and transform this background. First, I'm going to change the monitor view so that we're viewing our screen at 50%. These are the edges of our screen. If you think of Anchor 2's shot, it sort of shows this area here. If I increase its scale more, I can remove most of that darker black corner. If I look at the inspector, we can see that in the transform area, I increased the scale 151%. I'm going to make that easier and just reduce it down to 150%. Now, I know that the scale will always just be 150%. Now I'm going to look at this one here. It's Anchor 1's camera shot. We should be able to see some of the middle directly over Erin and some of this off to her side. I'm going to increase the scale to 150% and then slide the background this way so that we have an area for B-roll over the anchor's outside shoulder. You can see the dual shot with its background now, and now you can see Erin's shot with its background. Now we'll do the same for Anchor 2. Scale to 150% and slide her background this direction, the opposite direction that we slid Anchor 1's. So now we have the dual shot, Anchor 1, and Anchor 2's shot. I'll get rid of these because we don't need them. So now I need to create a section of just this background, and finally just this background. I'm going to do this with 3 new project timelines. I'll make one named Dual Anchor Background, another project timeline is Anchor 1 Background, and a third project timeline as Anchor 2 Background. It's important to remember which timeline is in front of you. You can use the back and forward arrows above your timeline. You can also click and hold down those arrows to actually select which project timeline you want to work on at that moment. If I copy the background for the dual anchor, I can paste it into my dual anchor background timeline. I'll extend it out as far as possible. Then I'll move it to the main timeline and delete this gap. Then notice that this clip is at 150% for its scale. And then copy it and paste it over and over again until I have about 2.5 minutes of that background. Once I have them all in there, I'll highlight them all, right-click on one of them, and choose to make a new compound clip. This nests all of these small clips into one video file. Here is my dual anchor background clip. It's going into the Project Timelines event, but I'm going to switch that to backgrounds. This will make one compound clip named Dual Anchor Background Clip and place it into our Backgrounds event. If I click onto the background event, you can see this new file called Dual Anchor Background with an icon that looks like a clip within a clip. I'll go back into our main project and select Anchor 1's background and copy it. I can also click Done in the viewer because I'm done transforming it. I can go to my Anchor 1 background timeline and paste that clip in. I'll move it up onto the main channel and stretch it all the way out. Then I'll copy it and paste it several times. Anchor 1 has more screen time than both anchors do together, so I'm going to paste them for 4 minutes. Now that I have 4 minutes, I'll select it all, make it a compound clip, name it Anchor 1 Background, and place it into the Backgrounds event. Now it's time to do Anchor 2's background. We'll go back to our main project timeline. This is the one that we made for Janine. You can see that the darker part hits the corner above here. When it's Erin's, we can see the darker part in the corner over here. When it's both of them, we can see the darker corners just slightly above each of them. We'll copy Janine's background for Anchor 2. We'll paste it into the Anchor 2 background timeline, move it up to the main channel and stretch it out. Copy it again and paste it until we have about 4 minutes. Then we can select all of the clips, right-click, and make a new compound clip. We'll name it Anchor 2 Background and place it into the Backgrounds event. Now I can go back to our main project and delete these ones out. I can then take the Dual Anchor Background, which is a compound clip, and place it below their intro. I'm going to use the razor blade tool and cut it as soon as the Dual Anchor clip ends. I'll slide it down further in the timeline the next time we have the dual anchors on the screen again. Now I need to place markers where their stories change. I'm going to use the J, K, and L keys to scrub through the timeline and find where it switches from Anchor 1 to Anchor 2. I want to find the first frame where it changes to Anchor 2 and place a marker by pressing the letter M. I could cut these with the razor blade tool, but I think it will be easier for everyone if we just use markers. Here is where it changes from Anchor 2 back to Anchor 1. I place it on the first frame of Anchor 1 and press the M key to drop a marker. I'll continue doing this all the way through the entire timeline. It's important to make sure that you have the main channel selected so that it places the marker on the main line of your footage. With snapping turned on, I can move my playhead to the marker when the dual anchor shot ends. I can use the razor blade tool to cut it, then go back to the Select tool. Choose the tool in your toolbar, or you can press the letter A on your keyboard for the Select tool. I can then drag the dual anchor background down until we need it again. I can continue to cut at the end of the dual anchor stories and slide the dual anchor background down to the next dual anchor story. Now continue this process, cutting, sliding, until you reach the end. Once you don't need that clip anymore, drag it a little further down and it will hang onto the gap that's created because we're working farther down the timeline than we need to. I can then do the same thing with all of the Anchor 1 stories. I'll place the Anchor 1 background under the first frame of Anchor 1's first story and then cut the background at the end of that story, just before it switches to Anchor 2. I'll slide the background down until the next time we need it, move to the end of that story, blade the background again, and then slide the background down the timeline until the next time I need it. Continue this process with Anchor 1's background until you complete all of Anchor 1's stories. When you reach the end, simply drag the clip onto the gap and it will hang there until we're done. Then we'll do the same thing for Anchor 2's background. By having snapping turned on, it makes this process a lot easier because you know that your playhead will line up exactly at the start or the end of a clip, or even at a marker. Now continue placing Anchor 2's background until you reach the end, then drag the excess onto the gap and leave it there until we're finished. Once we have all the backgrounds in place, we can skim through the entire project and double check to make sure that our starts and ends are all correct. Take some time to check over your project. When you have it as good as you can get it, you can export this video. Name it Lead Editor Background Practice - your name and partner's name, and then take a break. We'll continue with the next video.